What's up, degenerates? This is Locked In. I'm your host, Mason Cameron at PFF_Mace on socials. And with me, as always, my partner in crime, Vishaal Gupta at Vishaal_Gupta 95 on socials. Week one was crazy. We had a wild week of action. What a way to start it off. How are you doing? How did you like the games? Are you excited to do it again this week? I mean, we've got 18 more of these. I mean, probably even 20 because we're going to do this all the way through the playoffs. But how are you doing? Are you ready for week two in store right on our doorstep?
Absolutely. I'm doing great. Week one was a great primer, great way to start the season. Some interesting football, some not so great, some really good. Chargers Dolphins is awesome. Hopefully, we get more games like that throughout the season. So, really looking forward to week two.
Chargers Dolphins was such a good game, and we're going to talk about that one a little bit here later when we break down. I have some little tidbits from that game there. You know, wow, Miami so good. There were a lot of
Okay.
teams that showed up to play. There were some teams that didn't show up to play, and we're going to kind of break down all of that
We're both
today.
aware of which teams those were.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. A large portion of the playoff teams started week one 0-1. So it's going to be an interesting draw. First off, we're going to start off by breaking into the Thursday night game. We're going to break it down a little bit. Let me actually pull it up here so we have a little bit of a visual just so we can see what we're looking at here. There we go. Sorry, I had to scroll decently far. All right, here we go. So, this Thursday, last night, Minnesota took on Philly. It was actually a good game. It was a better game
Yeah.
than I had anticipated. Minnesota 28, Philly 34. The line was about 6, 5.5 in some spots. So, really, that half point became a big deal and actually
Mhm.
decided the outcome of this game if Philly were to have covered or if they pushed there. We also had a total of 49 where the game went over. It was an impressive game. I mean, I really didn't think that Minnesota had it in them to kind of keep it this close as it was. And now maybe the score was a little bit closer than the game felt while they were playing it, but it was still a good game nonetheless. Kirk had himself a day as they were down a little bit. He had to throw 364 yards, 4 touchdowns. Jay Jetta, he had 14 targets, caught 11, 159 yards. He had an 89.2 receiving grade from our friends over at PFF. Jordan Addison, 2 touchdowns in 2 games so far. What an addition that's been to their offense. He's really helped them to, kind of step it up, take some of that pressure off of Justin Jefferson. And that could actually be big for them heading down the road. Unfortunately for them, though, they had some trouble hanging on to the football. Madison put one on the ground. JJ fumbled one going into the goal line for a touchback. They had one on special teams. It was just kind of a messy, sloppy game for them. On the other side, Philly, wow. I mean, they're a really good team and they don't always look like perfect every single play, but they always find a way to come out on top by the end. What about DeAndre Swift? That is insane. This is the
Yeah.
guy that we thought we were going to get when we first, everybody's been hyping him up his entire career. 175 yards on the ground. That's his career high. 6.3 yards per carry, 9 forced missed tackles. Devontae Smith had another big game, deep ball threat. There's a little bit of contention on the sideline there between AJ Brown and Jalen Hurts. I mean, people are thinking it's because of the targets, and I mean, they may be right, they may not be, but I'm not gonna speculate on what's going on there. But that might be something to watch moving forward. When you saw this game last night, what was going through your head? What did you learn about these two teams that we can take moving forward?
Pretty impressed with Philadelphia. I think offensively they didn't look great, especially early on. They just couldn't really get anything going. They were trying to run Jalen Hurts quite a bit, but it wasn't working. But credit to them, they switched up their game plan and they went run heavy. They just ran the ball down Minnesota's throat. There's a lot of teams out there that don't have the ability or the intelligence to update their play calling and adapt mid game, but we saw Philly do that. They have a new OC this year with Shane Steichen going to Indianapolis, and they have Brian Johnson taking over. So it's not totally unexpected that they're going to have some struggles early on. But again, being able to adapt and adjust and kind of change up your game plan to match your opponent's weaknesses. In this case, Minnesota just wasn't able to stop the run. Very impressive for them. And then for Minnesota, this is kind of what we expected. I think a lot of us coming into the season, they weren't going to be able to pull out all these wins that they were able to last year. They're probably more of a middle of the pack team, and when you turn the ball over 7 times in your first 2 games, you're going to struggle to win games. Even though Kirk Cousins has been fairly solid, I think he has 6 touchdowns in 2 games. I mean, that's a great start for him. But again, you can't turn the ball over as much as they have and expect to win games. So they're probably going to end up being a middle of the pack team this year. And then Philly, I mean, they're getting better. I mean, they will continue to get better. It's a slow start for them, but they're still 2-0, and we haven't even seen them as close to 100% yet.
Right, and I think that that's the scary part about them is that this roster at their peak last year looked unstoppable at points, and right now they look good, but they don't feel like they've maxed out that potential, and they still look like
Right.
they can be even better. So they're going to be an interesting team to watch moving forward. And with some lines like this, where we look at like 5.5 and 6, and them getting fairly close to covering, that's encouraging sign moving forward, especially when the opposing team put up 28. So, you know that
Yep.
they can really come out there and compete even when some of these spreads are higher, which is sometimes harder than when, these two good teams get together and, the spread is just a point or two. Like sometimes those games are more of like, hey, who's just going to win this game? Whereas these
Right.
games are 5, 6, more than a touchdown scores, they can become difficult for them to cover because the game script doesn't always go that way to, match the spread that we need to cover there. But I can't wait to watch them move forward. And you know what? The Vikings, if they could win some games, they just need to come across the right opponents.
Well,
Teams
they have
that
the
just
Chargers
can't keep
next
up with
week,
that
so
firepower.
it could be a slow start for them.
Yeah, that's a tough draw. Exactly.
Yeah.
All right, so that is the Thursday night game. We're going to head straight into the early slate. And one of the most interesting games on the agenda here, where we have the Raiders at the Bills. The Bills have the numbers been all over the place. It was as high as like 9.5 a couple days ago. Right now it's about 8.5, 8 in different spots, depending on where you're leaning and who you shop with, which also brings up another point that we make every single show and that we make every year, frankly, is don't settle for one book, get an account for all of them, shop around. That can mean the difference of you making money and not. So definitely be aware of that. But right here, I think we're both on Buffalo to cover this spread at about 8 or an 8.5. And it looks like the sharps are also 95% of the money for this handle is on Buffalo to cover this, but only 68% of the tickets. So the public is still there too, but sharps are much higher on it. Uh, that's that's I mean that's where I fall with it too. What do you see when you see this matchup though, V?
Yeah, this is a game where I think everybody fully expects Buffalo to come out just firing after what happened to them on Monday night. Josh Allen obviously didn't look good. He had 3 interceptions, a fumble lost. It was just a very sloppy performance overall. But we've watched him for 5, 6 years now. I think we all know Josh Allen is a superstar. He'll have games like this occasionally just because he's so talented. He thinks he can do more than he can. I mean that leap that he tried to do on 3rd and long when he was still 6 yards short of the first down was insane. Only Josh Allen's crazy enough to do something like that, and that's going to get them in trouble every now and then, especially against better teams. But when you're playing a Las Vegas team that let's be honest, they're not overly talented. It's this is the type of game where they're going to win 35-17, and it's just going to be an easy cover throughout the whole game. Not very concerned. The Raiders just don't have the talent that the Jets do, especially on defense. They're not going to be able to hold down this Buffalo offense. And then I don't think the Raiders offense is really going to be able to do anything in this game. Jacoby Myers, who was pretty much their main bright spot last week with 2 touchdowns, is going to miss this game with a concussion. So you still have Devontae Adams, you still have Josh Jacobs, but that's not going to be enough to keep up with this Buffalo offense. So I think this should be a pretty easy cover, double-digit win for the Bills.
Yeah, this is just a get right game for Buffalo. Like, they had that wake up call where, they had a game that they could have won and they just kind of let it slip away off a sloppy play. That's something that a good coaching staff gets together and they polish out. So
Right.
I would expect them to come out week 2 really firing, not let their foot off the pedal. And I think you hit it on the head. Las Vegas is not the Jets. They're nowhere near the New York Football Jets. Like, in terms of defensive prowess, I don't know that there's many defenses as solid, stacked top to bottom as the Jets in this league.
Right.
They came out and they were the reason why an MVP candidate like Josh Allen, he looked sloppy. He had 4 turnover worthy plays, fumbles, just some kind of head scratchers. They really put him in shambles. Whereas on the other side, the Raiders and Broncos just did not have a great game.
No.
And it's really not all that surprising because they're kind of middling rosters like we've talked about. They weren't really striving to be like taking over the AFC West or anything like that, but neither team looked that effective. They ended up coming away with a pretty close win. But like you said, Jacoby Myers getting hurt is a pretty big blow for them. They still have Devontae Adams, but like a shallow offense gets shallower. And now you need Josh Jacobs to kind of show up. And, one of the reasons why Devontae Adams really didn't, pop off is because Patrick Surtain, really did well against him. And the rest of that defense did really well against him. But without the added, pressure reliever of Jacoby Myers running these great routes to free up Devontae Adams, I don't know that it's going to be quite as effective, especially because, Jimmy Garoppolo, as much as he's a beautiful man, he's kind of just another dude in the league. He's not the guy, he's a guy. And as much as he actually graded out fairly well
Yeah, the
against the
analytics love
Broncos,
him, man.
yeah, he graded out fairly well against the Broncos, but he just doesn't really do anything overly impressive. And every time you watch him play, you're going to be left at one point or another going, wait, Jimmy, what are you doing with that ball, my man?
Right.
And that's kind of where you're going to be with him. And you can't make those mistakes. Like, the Bills defense played okay, but they can reach a higher potential there as well. And you can't play like that against the Bills defense. So I'm right there with you. And it makes sense that that's why sharps have about 95% of the dollar dues on Buffalo this week. And I think we both agree. The next game on our schedule, though, there's some really good matchups, and we're talking
Oh
about
yeah.
games of the week. This might end up being the game of the week. We know that these divisional matchups in the AFC North are hard hitting. They really don't like each other. Actually, they hate each other. And this one is going to be a knockdown, all out brawl. The Baltimore Ravens head into Cincinnati to take on the Bengals. The spread for this game is -2.5, -3, depending on where you're shopping, for Cincinnati. Myself here, I'm on the side of Baltimore. And really, it just comes down to this: 3 points on the road is very reasonable when these two types of teams match up. Like we just said, the division runs really close, especially this division. Divisional games in general tend to, but this one specifically does. A lot of pride on the line. These teams don't like each other. But when you add on the fact that one of these teams, regardless of opponent, one of these teams looked really good in week 1. Or I should say, looked good. Looked like they have something to
Good
build
enough.
off of.
Yeah.
The enough, right, thank you. And one of them just did not. And frankly, when you kind of break it down into X's and O's or even just into like trends, I know that we don't like to talk about we say this all the time, especially earlier on in the season, because you hear trends from like the year before or like, oh, the Bengals couldn't, win week 1 type of like, yeah, those trends don't really matter. They're kind of plucked data as opposed to really actionable stuff in their recent trends. So when you do say that, though, there is something to kind of be said about, wow, Cincinnati really doesn't come out very well in week 1. They're 1-3 against the spread since Burrow was drafted in 2020, and they're not much better in week 2 at 1-2 against the spread. since Burrow was drafted. So now I'm not sitting here saying that you should only bet based on that tidbit of information because that'll get you killed. But from another sense, these teams in this matchup might not go the way Cincinnati's hoping for them to rebound. And what I mean by that is when you look at what happened, Cincinnati, when they played Cleveland, Cleveland just muscled them on defense. They had a lot of trouble stopping Myles Garrett and Zadarius Smith. They harassed Joe Burrow for a ton of pressures, and the coverage allowed just 82 yards. I mean, that was a huge talking point throughout the week with them in that regard. But on the other side, Baltimore absolutely hunted CJ Stroud. They hunted CJ Stroud in his pro debut so bad that he might not even play this week because of a right shoulder injury that was just released from the reports just a couple of hours ago. They had 30 pressures against him, 5 sacks, the 4th highest pressure rate in the NFL. Now, that's not a matchup for a team that's, having trouble finding their footing on the offensive line. And when you put that together, Joe Burrow not having enough time. Now, he's been good while under pressure, but him not having enough time, no quarterback is better under pressure than they are without it. It's just how the game works. If somebody's not bearing down on me, I'm going to throw the ball better. So, with that being said, it's going to be difficult for them to, in my opinion, put up points against this team, just like they struggled against Cleveland. And on top of that, the Baltimore Ravens are a much better offense than Cleveland. Like, Cleveland played well on offense. They did what they needed to do to get in and get the win. And I guess that Baltimore maybe didn't blow the doors off of Houston. But there were some times, especially, man, when you watch Zay Flowers, 10 targets for Zay Flowers. This man looks like a cheat code with the ball in his hands, cutting, spinning, breaking tackles. And then when you think about the fact that Odell didn't even really see much work, like, we have a lot that can happen here where this offense could really end up maxing out their potential and being one of the top 5 units and, debatably the fastest offense in the NFL. Lamar, we already know what he can do. He's finally got weapons. I think that this might be a coming out game for them. What do you see when you see a hard-nosed matchup like this out of the AFC North?
Yeah, well, this line started at 3.5 to start the week, and I was definitely very tempted to jump on Baltimore as well. But the injuries, man, they just piled up too much for me to want to touch this one. We know J.K. Dobbins got hurt during the game last week. He's going to miss the season. And then throughout the week, we've learned Ronnie Stanley's going to be out. Tyler Linderbaum is going to be out. 2 key pieces on their offensive line. And then in their secondary, Marlon Humphrey is still out, and Marcus Williams is not going to miss time. It's just so many injuries for this team. It's tough. It's tough to take either side, especially when this line is sitting at 3. It can really go either way. It's totally fine to take the points in this one. If you're torn, that's probably where you want to go, is take the points. Honestly, Lamar didn't look all that great last week. He had an interception, had a pretty bad fumble. I think multiple fumbles, but only one was lost. So he didn't look spectacular.
Right.
But I think he'll get better as the season goes on and as he adjusts to his new weapons. He should be getting Mark Andrews back this week. So I think there's definitely opportunities for him to play well. And then, Cincinnati is just, who knows how long it will take them to get the rust off. I know it'll happen eventually, but if it'll be this week, next week, the week after, who knows? But eventually they'll get right. But not comfortable betting on them either in this game for me. So kind of just a stay away thanks to all the injuries with Baltimore.
Yeah, and it makes sense. And I think, it'd be disingenuous for me to be like, oh, the offensive line having issues in Cincinnati is going to be an issue, but it's not in Baltimore. And like, my only justification for that is that a guy like Lamar can move better than a guy like Joe.
Right.
So you get a little bit more leeway in something like that, but that obviously is a worry for them. And you're hoping that the added, firepower from getting Mark Andrews back is going to be better. And I'd like to see them really, lean into the speed of this offense. I don't think the ball should be staying in Lamar's hands very often. Get it out. Don't force him to throw the ball too far down the field. Run a lot of short routes. Let these receivers get the ball in their hands and make the plays, because there's some really, really talented stuff on the outside there. And I can't wait, regardless of how this one goes down, I can't wait to watch it play out. I really
100%.
can't.
Yep.
I really can't because as much as, Cleveland played really well last week, one of these two teams is winning the North. Just a fact.
Yep.
The next game, the morning slate has way too many good games. Somebody needed to take a look at this before they release the schedule because the next game on our slate is Kansas City at Jacksonville. So a couple of developments happened in Kansas City's corner this week, as they had the long week off playing Thursday night in week one. Chris Jones contract holdout. He signed his deal. He is going to be coming back. There's a lot of kind of criticism from capologists, I should say, or
Yep.
cap reporters about why even bother holding out if that was the deal you were going to come back to. Doesn't really guarantee any new money, doesn't extend him through this year, really just adds incentives to the end of his contract, which I don't think anybody told him are going to be harder to reach now that you're one less game. But I
Yep.
guess, I
Can still
digress.
be tagged next year.
Right. And they can still get tagged next year. So I guess my question will be why do it at all? But, that's for him and his agent to hash out, not me. So that's solved. He's going to be back on that defense who did need the help last week against the Lions, where they looked okay, but the Lions ended up getting that play at the end of the game to win. And that's something that Chris Jones probably would have helped to stop. So we'll see.
Yeah.
And also Travis Kelce, knee injury. He's back this week, or he's projected to be back this week, looking pretty good in practice. He's kind of making jokes about having been injured and throwing back twerks. So it's good to see he's in high spirits and not hurting too bad. Otherwise, though, V, you're on the side of Jacksonville at home with points. 3.5 points is what you're getting here. I wonder, if that might even move a little bit closer to 3. That's going to be something to watch for, maybe something to act early on. V, what are you seeing when you see this? This is a good matchup. This is just a good matchup. I can't wait to watch. I'm going to have to get more TVs out for all these good ones early on.
Yeah. Yeah, this is a great, great matchup. Patrick Mahomes, Trevor Lawrence, can't ask for much more than that. But you're right. Chris Jones is coming back. Travis Kelsey is coming back. So this is a scary game to be betting on the Jaguars. But when you're getting the hook, man, it's just too hard to pass up. Jacksonville at home getting 3.5. Really just can't pass on that number. Lawrence looked fantastic last week against the Colts. The game kind of seemed a little closer than it was, more competitive than it actually was in that game. The Colts actually went up late in the third quarter in that one. But that was really due to a weird fumble play where Lawrence got hit. The ball came out, and Jacksonville's offense kind of just stopped playing because they thought it was a dead ball. It was still a live ball, allowing Indy to score and take the lead. If that play doesn't happen, though, then I think that's a much bigger win for Jacksonville and kind of makes them look like the more dominant team that they actually are. And I think Lawrence will just continue to play well. Man, he made some fantastic throws, rolling to his left, hitting Calvin Ridley, hitting Zay Jones in the corner with an unbelievable throw. He looks like the star that he was projected to be coming out of Clemson. He's going to be a future MVP in this league. I feels pretty concrete about that. I don't think Kansas City has the guys in the secondary to slow him down, especially with L'Jarius Sneed. He's been limited at practice this week. He might not play, or he's not going to be at full 100% when he does play. On the flip side, I also don't think Jacksonville has the guys on defense to really slow down Kansas City and Mahomes. But the thing with Kansas City is, even with Kelce coming back, you still have concerns about their wide receivers. I mean, Kadarius Toney is still probably going to be a big part of their offense, despite how he played last week, just because they don't have enough other guys. So I just don't know if, as good as Mahomes is, as many dimes as he throws, if his receivers aren't going to help him out, then this is going to be a closer game than it probably should be, and it's going to allow Jacksonville to stay in there. And I really wouldn't be shocked if Jacksonville wins outright. Trevor Lawrence is just that good of a player, so I'm going to take Jacksonville with the hook in this one.
Yeah. And we might be a little ahead of it, but this game could, Mahomes is always in the MVP conversation, so that kind of goes without being said. But this might be, the two top MVP candidates when we get
Yep.
3 months down the road. Trevor Lawrence looked amazing with Calvin Ridley. They look like in a fantasy sense, let me just shed some context and some light. In a fantasy sense, I got quite a few shares of Calvin Ridley.
Nice.
And the issue though is that I didn't play him at all in any league because I was
Really?
like 2 years off. I was like, he's like got like 18 months off football. I was like,
Nope.
he's gonna have a little bit of rust. I bet he gets like, 4 for like 48, maybe a touchdown. I'm willing to, wait. That was a huge mistake because I also had Rodgers in some leagues and lost by
Oof.
like a half of a point on Monday night. So that's neither here nor there. But they bottom line is they looked fantastic on offense.
Yeah.
And you hit the nail on the head is that this game was not as close as it looked because of that one super fluky play. And that's another reason why, that Colts and Texans game this week, I don't really think anybody cares about it because the Colts just didn't look all that good. And this whole situation where the Chiefs are hoping they're going to right the ship with just Travis Kelce. I love Travis Kelce. I think he's a fantastic player. He's a Hall of Famer and one of the best weapons in the league,
Mm.
let alone tight ends. He's one of the best weapons in the league. They have deeper seated problems than needing one weapon. They need to figure out quite a few things because the backyard football doesn't work when the other guys on the outside don't speak the language. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So we talk about this, and you know what? I'm not gonna bash Mecole Hardman or just anybody. I mean, not Mecole Hardman, Kadarius Toney. They're more or less the same player in my mind. That you know, the fact of the matter is, they need some oomph on the outside, and I know that it's really just a preseason, but Smith Marset was so good for them in the preseason, and he should be seeing more snaps. I don't understand why they don't go a little bit deeper because maybe guys like Rashee Rice, who was one of PFF's top graded rookies this week, he played really well. You know,
Yep.
get some of these younger guys a little more snaps, and I would say fade the Kadarius Tonys because it's just not working out in that realm. So that's going to be something that's gonna need to be watched for sure, but I can't wait to see this one play out. And my only reservation with this game is that there's going to be some weather potentially. They're talking about there's some thunderstorms forecasted.
Yep.
I'm curious how that affects the total for this game, which is set at 51 right now. That's the largest total of the week. Now, in a nutshell, 51 might not be a terrible number if the weather doesn't end up being an issue. But if there's really wet conditions, it's slippery, if at any point they have to kind of suspend play for the Thunder and these teams kind of lose their momentum or, you know, they got to warm back up,
Right.
that could cause an issue. So 51 being an insanely high number, or I shouldn't say insanely high, but a relatively high number, you might start sprinkling a little bit on the under, even though these are two fantastic offenses. And you
Yep.
might even wait up to game time as people don't always check the weather. And if people continue to just see, hey, Jacksonville, Kansas City, two really good offenses, 51 points, let's go over. The casual bettors are going to start coming in Saturday, Sunday. You might see this number move even higher and you might get it under it even more. So that's where I would sit on this. But yeah, I'm right there with you, V. This is going to be a really good matchup. And frankly, I can't wait to watch Trevor Lawrence all season long.
Yeah, that's gonna be fantastic.
It's going to be so good. And it's only right that after, three banger of games, or at least two really, really good games, that we move on to
Oof.
a bit of a tough one. So this is actually one that we had a lot of skin on. We have about 3 or 4 picks between the two of us on this game. We have the Bears. They're heading into Tampa to take on the Buccaneers. The Bucks are 2.5-point favorites at home, or it looks like even it's moving around to 3 in some spots. total for this game, 40.5 points, 41 in some spots. I'm on the side of taking Tampa Bay because, wow. We'll get into Chicago here in a second, but let me say some good stuff about Tampa before I inevitably say some very hurtful things about the Bears. So we said this last week, V. Don't be surprised when Tampa ends up winning this game against Minnesota in week 1. And they
Yep.
did. They
Yep.
did. They came out. Todd Bowles' defense looked really, really good. Held Minnesota to 17, who we just talked about a little bit ago. That team came out and scored 28 on another really good defense in Philly. So maybe this Tampa defense is the real deal. And if it is the real deal, it can go a long way to covering up some of these deficiencies that we would, come to expect with a Baker Mayfield led offense. Well, turns out maybe pissed off Baker Mayfield on his third team in 3 years, he might have found a home in Tampa because he had one of his better, he wasn't outstanding on the box score, but he was efficient, didn't turn the ball over, didn't have turnover worthy plays, did not make mistakes. He was the 5th highest graded passer by PFF in week 1. Now, it wasn't fantastic. It's a 79.9. But that just shows you that, hey, this guy can come in and operate your offense. He kept them on rhythm. He kept them on schedule. And I know they only scored 20 against a poor Minnesota defense, but Chicago is much, much, much worse. And I hate to say that, having been the person who was like, take Chicago, baby, -1. That's what I was saying
Yep.
last week. And you even told me, you're like, nah, it's a trap. That's a trap. And I fell for it because I fell for what they can be and not what they have been. And what they have been, I'm not going to harp on the Bears too much. But for anybody who didn't see, JT O'Sullivan runs a YouTube channel called The Quarterback School. It's a really, really good channel. I suggest you go check it out. Give him a subscription, follow him, whatever it is, that jazz. But go check out that video. It's an hour-long, top-to-bottom breakdown of the Bears offense. And wow, it's a doozy. So, just to kind of summarize it, play calling, extremely questionable. Fields' decision making was suspect. Play design, confusing. And when you have some smart guys like JT O'Sullivan going, I don't even know what they're trying to run here, then you have, kind of some questions. Now, obviously, they could be, trying to install something and doing something else, and maybe there was mistakes on the way, but there's a lot of confusion and very, very little cohesion going on in this offense. They got shut out by the Packers. Not just shut out, they got absolutely walloped by the Packers. And without Aaron Rodgers, I don't know. I don't see, it's hard to be not overreact to such a horrid performance as that, but we don't have anything else to go off of this far into the year, that it's hard not to be like, I don't see how they could get better. They have a lot of coaching kind of foundational things that I think they still need to establish in that offense. And I don't know that you figured that out in 1 week. I know the Bears are near and dear to your heart. They're taking on the Bucks, and you've got skin on this game too. What are you targeting with this matchup, and why are you? And what are you thinking about this Bears team? How are you feeling about them?
Not feeling great, I'm sure, as most people would expect. But it is what it is. Either they'll figure it out or they won't. Probably they won't, and kind of blow it up again. But we'll see how it goes. But I think I like the over in this game, over 40.5. And the big reason is what you said earlier, was because of Chicago's just terrible defensive performance last week. These guys got absolutely no pressure in the passing game against Jordan Love, and they got absolutely torn apart in their secondary. And now it getting even worse this week. One of their key players in the secondary, Kyler Gordon, is going to be out for a few weeks with a hand injury. I just don't see how they're going to be able to slow down anything that this Tampa Bay passing game is going to do this week with Evans and Godwin just being much better players than anybody Chicago has in their secondary. And that's why I'm also on the over 54.5 receiving yards for Chris Godwin, is one of my favorite plays this week. He plays out of the slot. Kyler Gordon was their main nickelback. With him being out, they don't have anybody good enough to cover Godwin. I think he's going to have a monster game, easy over 54.5 receiving yards for him. So I don't think Tampa Bay is going to have much issue getting 24, 25, 27 points in this game. On the flip side, Tampa Bay is also dealing with some injuries on defense. Carlton Davis is out in secondary, and rookie Kalijah Cansey is going to be out with a calf injury. So I think there will be some room for Chicago's offense to do some things. As terrible as they were last week, they still managed to score 20 points. Some of that came in garbage time, but all of it counts when you're betting on the game and just taking the over. So I'm not going to be mad about that. So I think they can definitely hit 20 points again in this game. It only takes one or two plays from Justin Fields to be able to put up points. We know how explosive he is. And, hopefully you would hope that they would be competent enough to find some adjustments they can make. It can't really get any worse than what it was last week. So just make a couple adjustments here and there, and I think they can at least get up to 21 points. And I think this will be like a 24-21 type game either way. And I think this should be pretty relatively easy over for me.
And I'm right there with you. I think that does leave some room. I'm hoping that the spread, elongates just a little bit there. Maybe we have that, defensive score that helps take that over and give
Very
that Bucks the
possible.
lead. I think we can work together on this one, V, so that we all come out happy at the end. But
I'm going to say there's a special teams touchdown in there somewhere for Tampa Bay, and that's going to
there you
really put
go.
us over the top.
There you go. I like that. Not that either of us will know, because I'm pretty sure. I mean, you might watch because
I mean,
who
I did
cares?
myself.
But
I'm going to watch every second, but that's
I was
just
gonna
me.
say, I was gonna say, you'll have to tell me how it went, because
For
I'm not
sure.
gonna watch it. The next game on the schedule here, the last one of the morning slate for us, is actually another really interesting one. So this one is tough because you have
Yeah.
Seattle heading into Detroit to take on the Lions, and this one we've had it kind of move a little bit. Detroit is favored 4.5 at home, but but I don't know. I think that it's hard to tell. Now, yeah, Seattle really didn't look like outstanding against a team like the Rams, where we thought like the Rams really shouldn't be this good of an opponent, and the things that Seattle does well should take advantage of what the Rams don't do well.
Right.
And that just really didn't happen for them. There was a lot of kind of questionable plays. Aaron Donald being, his regular Aaron Donald self. That hilarious soundbite of Gino having Aaron Donald bear down and nearly take his head off, and you can just hear the hot mic of,
Yeah.
"Oh my God!" Like that was kind of the full encompassment of that game, in my opinion. Whereas the Lions, they're at home. They're coming off a big win in week 1 and extra rest. So you're liking the total in this game. What are you
Yep.
seeing with this matchup, and why are you going the way you're going?
Yeah, the biggest shock I think for me last week in the Rams Seahawks game, uh, other than Geno Smith not playing particularly well, was just the lack of pressure Seattle's D line was getting on the Rams. I mean, they had 0 sacks against what is considered a below average offensive line. That was very shocking to me. And now Seattle's going to be playing an elite Detroit offensive line. And if you're not going to get pressure on Jared Goff, he's going to tear you apart. He is a good enough quarterback where he can wheel and deal. He is that prototypical point guard type quarterback that a lot of people talk about, where he's going to find the open guy if you don't pressure him. So I just don't see how Seattle's defense will be able to do much against this Detroit offense. Seattle is getting some guys back in the secondary with Jamal Adams and Devin Witherspoon expected to play this week. So I think it will be a very interesting matchup to see what they can do against Amon-Ra St. Brown and some of the other weapons that Detroit has. But again, if you're not going to pressure Goff, I think Detroit's offense is going to win out. They're going to be able to put up plenty of points in this one. And then on the flip side, Detroit's defense was okay last week. They had a couple good moments, but I think in general, they're still not a very formidable group. If the Chiefs wide receivers just catch a couple of those balls, it's a completely different ball game. Kansas City is going to have 28, maybe even 30 points in that game. And, one of those great defensive plays for Detroit was literally just a drop right out of Kadarius
Yeah.
Tony's hands, right into Brian Branch's hands. So I think they probably look better than they actually are given how bad KC played. But I don't think it's going to be the same thing for Seattle's offense. They should have a bounce back game after what they showed last week. That was pretty unacceptable for them. So I'm sure they're going to have a chip on their shoulder and try to perform as well as they know they can. So I expect plenty of points from both sides. This feels like 50 points pretty easily combined from both teams.
Yeah, so going over the 47 there, which it looks like it's even rising since we've made our picks here. It looks like we're looking at about 47 and a half now. So
Yeah.
if anybody is, tailing V on that, go in, get in now before it gets too high, because you know that number is probably going to keep going up, because why wouldn't it be? I'm right there with you. The Lions are kind of just that middling defense. They expect themselves to win this year off of offense and
Mhm.
playing just well enough on defense to win some close games. That doesn't really bode super well for like a 4.5 point spread, where we talk about all the time. When you move past these key numbers of 3, you're kind of looking at like it being a touchdown game. As much as the Seahawks left a lot to be desired, that's still kind of a big ask, because they
Yeah.
can put numbers up in bunches. This could end up being, like you just said, this kind of has all the signs for end up being a shootout. If these teams do what they do well, that's what'll end up happening. So I'm
Yeah.
right there with you. And that actually concludes the early slate. So we have a handful on the late slate, and then we have one for Sunday night. And I think there's 2 games on, is it Monday night or
Yeah.
is it Sunday night? Okay, 2 games
2
on
games
Monday
on
night.
Monday night this week and next week.
Okay, and we have one of them, and maybe, just maybe, we might even have some picks for that other Monday night game if you go into our Discord, join our Discord. I know we have, hold on, yep, there you go, right there at the bottom.
Nice.
Join our Discord. That's how you get into our Discord to blah, blah, blah. Join our website. That's how you get into our Discord, so you can ask us questions and such. Okay, there we go. I did that right that time.
Yeah.
All right. Oh, wait. Am I on the wrong one again? Hold on, y'all. There we go. All right. So our first game of the afternoon slate is one that comes near and dear to my heart. It's another bad game that I will be watching every second of. We have the Washington Commanders going into Denver to take on the Broncos. The Broncos are 3.5 point favorites here for some reason. And the total for this game is 38.5 points. Now, everybody that's ever watched this show ever knows that as a Denver native, I, have a soft spot for the Broncos, but I have an even softer spot for making money. You're on the side of the spread here. Myself, I'm on the side of the total. And because, like I said, anybody that's ever watched this show knows that we love Denver unders. And I know it's a new season, and I know they have a new system and a new offense and a new head coach, but I'm still riding the unders until they prove me otherwise. They
And
are
they certainly didn't do
6
that last week.
they only have 6 overs in the last 18 games since acquiring Russell Wilson, including 0-1 on game total overs in this season with Sean Payton. And we talked about it when we talked about the Raiders. Neither of these teams, being the Broncos or the Raiders, were overly impressive offensively. I don't really know where points are going to come from. They're still relatively decent on defense, and the Commanders are relatively decent on defense. This is going to be another interesting game. I can't wait to see kind of play out. But even at a low number like 39, man, they're probably going to still clear this number under by like 6-7 points. I don't think you're even going to end up being anywhere close to it. So that's where I side on this. As much as I hate to say it, V is on the side of taking Washington plus 3.5 on the road against the Broncos. And you know what? I get it, though. 3 and the hook against this team. I'm not going to lie. I understand that Washington has to travel from the East Coast to do this, but I don't see that really not being the case, especially with how Denver's played and how, Washington might not have covered and they might have had a little bit of a struggle against, the Arizona Cardinals, but now they're getting points. Like,
Yep.
I think it's that simple. Now they're getting points. What do you see when you see this matchup though, V?
Yeah, the first thing that stood out was, what has Denver done in the past year and a half to deserve getting the hook in this game? All they've done is underachieve expectations. We talked about the Kansas City Jacksonville game earlier with Kansas City getting 3 and the hook, and you can understand why a team like that gets the hook, even though they didn't play particularly well last week. We know what they can do. We know what their ceiling is. We don't know what Denver. Well, I mean, we know what it is. They have a very limited ceiling. They can't do much until proven otherwise. So it's very strange for them to get 3 and the hook. That's why when the line first came out, I jumped all over the Commanders on this one. I think this is going to be an ugly defensive game. Washington's defensive line was dominant last week. Those guys up front just bullied Josh Dobbs the entire game. He couldn't do much. And now they're getting Chase Young back. He wasn't even on the injury report, so you expect him to be 100%. This could be an extremely long day for Russell Wilson if all those guys continue to play as well as they did last week. Denver's offense really didn't do much last week against a below average Raiders defense. They will be getting Jerry Jeudy back this week, but they did lose Greg Dulcich, so it's kind of getting one playmaker and losing another. Will be interesting to see how that works out for them. On the other side, I mean, Howell did not look fantastic last week against what was expected to be a poor Arizona defense, so he could struggle in this one against what we would think would be a slightly better Broncos defense. But Frank Clark is out for this game, so it might not be as bad as it could be. So I think just in general, there's too many signs pointing towards this being an extremely low scoring, close game. And also another game where we shouldn't be surprised if Washington wins this one and they're kind of the surprise 2-0 team that everybody's talking about come Monday and Tuesday.
Which is so tough because it's like, man, you played the Cardinals and the Broncos, but hey, they are good
2-0
though.
is 2-0.
2-0 is 2-0. You got to win the games that are in front of you against opponents you get. And frankly, the thing about with the Broncos, especially in regards of Jerry Jeudy, is that hamstrings are just such a finicky
Yeah.
thing. In a fantasy sense, I would be terrified to play him. From an offensive standpoint for the Broncos, I'd be terrified to kind of lean on him because you're really only one, deep ball away from him being out for another 3 weeks. These things are really hard to just come back from. Now, you hope that he got the training, the time in the training room, and all that stuff that he needed to really get back and soothe that hamstring out. But they're just such a tough body part. It's really tough to know how effective he's going to be and how many snaps he's going to play to really make a difference. And another thing I want to touch on, though, I know Sean Payton's been doing this for a long time. I know Sean Payton has forgot more about football than I will ever know. But did anybody tell him that maybe in year one, you should scale back the offense just a tiny bit? You don't need a play sheet that's this long with 45 different formation categories. That's hard. And understand that you're getting a veteran quarterback who should be able to kind of, expedite the transition process than if you were trying to teach a young quarterback a new NFL scheme. But man, I don't know anybody who could sit there and effectively run an offense that in depth as that play sheet had indicated. Now, maybe he wasn't using the entire play sheet. Maybe he does only have certain packages. I don't know. I'm not in the huddle. I have zero idea. I just know that doesn't look like a team that is totally comfortable with the scheme they're running on offense. It looks like a lot of guys playing slowly, second guessing what they're doing, and not really understanding maybe the nomenclature of this new offense. That's something that's going to be, maybe you watch for. And that's something that I'm going to continue to make money off of every time I come in and take an under. And I promise you, this will not be the last time that we talk about a Broncos under on this show.
Definitely
And
not.
definitely not. So the second game we have on in the late window here, the aforementioned Arizona Cardinals are hosting the 0-point New York Giants. I actually think I said shut out when I was talking about the Bears earlier. I meant blown out. This was the shutout. The
Yep.
New York Giants had 0 against the Dallas Cowboys. The Cardinals, as bad as they are, kind of took Washington as much as they could. In the end, it didn't work out. But you have the 2-0-1 teams facing off in Arizona. V, what do you make of this one here? What what do we see when we think about the New York Giants and what they looked like against the Dallas Cowboys versus the team many assume will end up having the first pick in the draft this next season or this next year?
Yeah, this is a stink fest. This is definitely the worst game on the schedule this week. It's not going to be pretty. Arizona, they played surprisingly well last week in terms of they kept the game close, but offensively, they didn't score a single touchdown. Their only touchdown came on a fumble recovery late in the first half against the Commanders. So their offense still not very good. They're still playing Josh Dobbs as quarterback, so you can't really expect them to do very much. However, their defense looked quite good, especially their defensive line. They had 6 sacks against Sam Howell, and now they're going up against a Giants offensive line that gave up 7 sacks. I mean, Daniel Jones was just tormented all day. And now Andrew Thomas, who is probably their best offensive lineman, has been limited all week with a hamstring. He might not play, so it could just be another rough day for Daniel Jones. I don't really see either team being able to move the ball at all in this one. This is just going to be a sloppy, limited offensive type game. You were talking about the hamstring with Jerry Jeudy. Darren Waller's also dealing with a hamstring. He could be very volatile and might not play consistently all throughout that game. So if he's not going to be playing, there's just not enough places for Daniel Jones to get with the ball. This is going to be a bad game, and definitely see the under in this one.
And for Darren Waller, not just a hammy, but like nerve damage. They're talking about
Yeah,
this man's hammy is unresponsive to light and sounds type things. Like it's it's a tough break when your playmakers that you're hoping are really going to come out for you and that you're really going to need to rely on end up having things like that. Um, but yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. They might not be playing the Dallas Cowboys this week, but
hmm
they're still the New York Giants, and they're probably going to be a lesser version, especially without their best blocker. So
yeah.
yeah. 39.5 points is actually higher than a bunch of games on this list that we've taken unders for. And so it
Surprisingly,
only
right?
it only screams more. And I guess I get to the point that they're like, well, neither of these defenses are that good, but we've gone over this before and we seem to go over it every year. Like if you can't move the ball, like inept offense is never really going to overtake like middling defense. It's just
Right.
not how the game works. You have to be effective and efficient on offense to take advantage of any kind of unit. Now, like granted, yes, there's a sliding scale for that type of thing, but where are we supposed to get 40 plus points for this game? Like where
It
does
would
the
all have to
math
be
add up?
defensive and special team touchdowns, to be honest. I mean, it
Yeah.
would have to be primarily that.
There'd have to be 3 defensive touchdowns in this game for that to end up being the number that they hit. I don't see it happening, and I'm right there with you. I think that that's probably the shortest and sweetest evaluation of any game we really need to have because
Yep.
there's just not a lot to it. There is just not a lot to it. But the next game is actually a little bit more interesting. We have the Jets at Dallas. Now, there's a lot to break down with this game, obviously. This is another game where the Dallas Cowboys are favored heavily. They're looking at about 9, 8.5 points, depending on where you shop. So over a touchdown. You're gonna have to hit 10 to clear this number. That's a big number. Now, granted, they put up a big old number against the Giants, but the Jets aren't the Giants. The Jets are a really, really good defense. Now, it sucks for them that they don't have Aaron Rodgers. Now, Aaron Rodgers was supposed to be the player that made this Jets team a contender. Now, they might not be a contender, but guess what? This is still one of the best defenses and most aggressive defenses in the NFL. They gave Josh Allen a headache when they played, ended up probably being the reason that that game was at all close towards the end, and the only reason the Jets ended up winning, because we know what's about to be under center for them. And I promise that I won't continue to harp on Zach Wilson unless he has another very, very atrocious outing like he did last year with his 77 yards. But we now know that their deficiencies at quarterback are going to be the same as they were last year. Now, that's not the end of the world. They were still a fairly decent team last year off of the weapons that they have on offense and the way that they play defense. So when I sit there and think, hey, you have a team in Dallas, at the end of the day, you have a team in Dallas that held the Giants to 0 points, and you have a team in the Jets that beat an MVP candidate and forced a bunch of turnovers. I mean, that just screams low scoring game. Now, when we talk about a little bit more in depth, yes, the Jets just aren't going to be able to produce on offense, and that's going to be a really, really tough go. When we talk about totals, when you can't expect one of the teams to kind of put in their share, it makes it incredibly hard to reach overs.
Yeah.
That's kind of where I sit with this one. Now, is the over impossible? No, because the Cowboys could have made over on this one last week. But to score 38.5, maybe only exclusively by themselves, might be too much of an ask, especially when you sit there and say, hey, we're playing the Jets, they're better defense, and we're going to be without one of our playmakers in Brandon Cooks, who is questionable with a knee injury after MCL sprain. He might be out for a little while. So that's going to be something to pay attention to. The Jets, at the end of the day, they only had 5 overs all of last season. I don't really see that being a different case this year. I think they're going to lean right back into the way they played football last year. Anything that you see that kind of differs on that, I know that the Jets can kind of be worrisome in a lot of spots, but at the end of the day, they won last week. And, not to toot my own horn here or anything, but I did say to take the Jets to win outright. Now, I thought they were going to have Rodgers, but they did it without him. And I think that
I was scared for
further
you like 5 minutes into that game. You're pretty
Oh,
confident
I
this
was
was done, right?
I was sweating. I was like, well, there goes that one. I was like,
Yeah.
I'm done. I looked at my fantasy rosters too. I'm like a half point down, and Rodgers is my only player left to play, and I just lost. I lose in the third play because of that. And also, you know what? I also just, since we're on the topic, people on social media, please. I do not need to see Aaron Rodgers snapped Achilles over and over and
That was rough.
over and over and over again on my timeline. I understand that it gets you clicks, and I understand that that's what Twitter's about, or X, or whatever you want to call it. But please, for the love of God, I don't want to see it anymore. I don't have to see it 100 times. All right, end of rant. But
Yeah.
do you see anything about this matchup?
Yeah, I've been kind of spending this whole week trying to convince myself to take the Jets and the points in this one just because it's so many points. Their defense is just
Yeah.
so unbelievably good. Secondary is fantastic. Their defensive line really gets at it. And they have such great weapons on offense. I mean, that Garrett Wilson catch was unbelievable. There's not really, I don't know how many other guys in the league can make that catch. It's not very many. Brees Hall looked great. Everything really points to wanting to take the Jets and the points, but how can you trust Zach Wilson going up against Micah Parsons, man? I would have nightmares if I was Zach Wilson having to prepare for Parsons this week. It's going to be a tough matchup. So, in general, probably stay away from the spread, but I think you've convinced me on the under. That might be something I add to my card as well this week.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. And man, Garrett freaking Wilson,
That was
man, that
unbelievable.
catch, unbelievable, insanity catch. And again, Garrett, the offer stands. If you ever want to come on the show, brother, we would love to have you.
Yep.
Garrett Wilson, friend of the show here, would be my number one used line for literally till the end of time. But Yeah, so that's that one. I think we're in agreement there. I think it's still an interesting game in the afternoon slate,
For
given that
sure.
not all of them are really all that great. So that's it for our afternoon slate, though. We head into Sunday night where the Dolphins take on the Patriots in New England. The total for, or excuse me, the spread for this one, the Dolphins road favorites, 3 points. The total for this game, 46 and a half. And we're kind of on, I wouldn't say different sides of it, but we're kind of targeting different parts of this game. I'm on the side of the spread. I like Miami. I actually got them at 2.5, which is
Nice.
even better because you don't have to, you know, have that spread or the push opportunity at 3. 2.5 if you can get it. 3 is also just a really good number anyway. And my reasoning behind that is, I mean, we talked about it kind of at the top of the show. The Miami Los Angeles game was the game of the week. It was so freaking good. And Miami flew cross country to do it. They flew cross
Yep.
country, won outright as a 3-point dog. Mike McDaniel's offense looks like an absolute enigma. NFL defenses have no idea what to do. Uh, uh, the defensive coordinators are going to need to like have a convention or something, get together and like plot and plan how they're going to figure out and stop this offense because it's just something that a mad scientist would make. Lots of
Yep.
motion, lots of speed. They ran the second most motion in the NFL last week, only second to Kyle Shanahan in San Francisco. I mean, everybody saw the play of Tyreek Hill motioning out from tight end and just absolutely ripping dudes apart. He looks uncoverable. I think he had like 215, a ton of targets. You know, we were talking about MVP candidates. It has to be said, though, that now Tua Tagovailoa is the new favorite in most sports books to win the MVP.
Wow. Nice.
That's just crazy, especially after last week. He's played so well and not just played so well for like just his standard, played well for any standard. On balls that he used to kind of leave short, he's throwing absolute dots to Tyreek Hill, which is harder to do than you think because the man is absolutely lightning fast. He's 40
100%.
yards in the blink of an eye, and you've got to reach that ball there. When I see this, I don't know. I know New England played decently well against the Ravens. They didn't just roll over for them, and they could potentially take advantage of a you know fairly weak Miami run defense who did not really do absolutely anything to stop the Chargers running game. Had one of the worst EPA per plays on run plays last week, but for me, the biggest catch is that something like that requires a lead. You have to have a lead to be able to run the ball or at least have the game be close within one possession. And I just think that that's a tall task for an offense that just does not have the juice to keep up with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle and whatever they're going to be putting, whatever Mike McDaniel is going to be doing in that offense. I think that that's an easy 3 on the road for me personally. When you see this game, V, you're on the side of over 46 and a half, and you
Yep.
like some props for this game. Why don't you break down what you're targeting for us on this one?
Yeah, definitely like the over 46.5 in this game, particularly because of what Miami did on offense last week. My biggest concern for them heading into the season was their offensive line and being able to protect Tua. I was very concerned that they weren't going to be able to do that, and Tua wasn't going to be able to withstand all the pressure he was facing. They go into Los Angeles last week without Teron Armstead, facing Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack, and a bunch of other pretty solid players on that defense. And even though Tua was pressured quite a bit last week, he got the ball out quickly and efficiently all day, and he hit guys in rhythm, in target. It was just a joy to watch him play football last week. And if he's going to be able to get the ball out quickly and not have to take hits and not get pressured consistently, sky is the limit for this team because their offense is terrific. They're going to put up plenty of points. This is a pretty good New England defense, but I just don't see how they're going to have the guys to slow down Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, and all the speed that Miami has on offense. And as good as Miami's offense was, their defense was kind of an equally big letdown, I would say, in general. They gave up over 460 yards of offense and 34 points last week against, I mean, it's a good Chargers offense, but that is just too many yards, too many points. Over 230 yards rushing for the Chargers running backs. That's just way too much. I think this could be a big Ramondre Stevenson game, and he's a prop I'm going to highlight in just a second. So I just don't see Miami's defense being able to do a whole lot in this one. I think Mac Jones played way better last week than I think anybody thought, and any that he should have. There was such a big talent disparity between New England's offense and Philly's defense. So that fact that Jones is able to have 3 touchdowns while throwing to guys like Kendrick Bourne, Hunter Henry, Juju Smith-Schuster, that's very impressive. I think that he played quite well, and I think he should have another opportunity to put up some nice numbers in this one. So I think this should be a relatively easy over for me. I don't see either defense really being able to do much. And my prop this week for this game that I like is Stevenson over 23.5 receiving yards. He had 6 catches for 64 yards last week against the Miami defense that gave up 4 catches for 47 yards to Austin Eckler last week. I think this is a really nice number. It's pretty low. This is a number that Stevenson can pretty much pick up in 1 reception if needed. And I think, like you said, this is going to be a game where New England's going to be trailing in this game late. And when New England trails, Mac Jones loves to dump it down to Ramondre Stevenson. So I think when they're in the hurry up late in the game, there's going to be a lot of targets for him. Should be an easy over on his prop and an easy over in this game.
Right. Yeah. Right. The thing is it sucks to be like, oh man, sorry, New England, you have no opportunity in this one, because that's not necessarily true. Because they played well against Philly.
Yeah,
Philly is
they
just
did.
an extremely strong roster, and unfortunately, I think they're coming up against another team like that right now. Except for, like you said, the weakness for Miami on defense is gonna show, especially if they don't figure out how to stop the run. Because I mean, we talk about this. Yes, you can beat high-powered offenses by controlling the football, but everything has to go right. One big play can really turn that on its head, and I think that when you look at a team like the Dolphins, their offense is big play, chunk play, big play, explosive play. Like, that's all they know how to do. They really just push the ball down the field. It's gonna be a tough draw for everybody, but just like you said, 46.5 is a very reasonable number to attain,
Yep,
especially if you can expect a team like the Dolphins to put up a very good portion of this number and really just need the Pats to kind of tail in there and do, their part. So
for
I
sure.
I like it. I'm right there with you. And Ramondre Stevenson, I think he's going to get a ton of work this week. I think he's going to be all over the field, getting in a ton with them. They need to. They need to get back to giving him the ball a ton, because
Yeah, they
he's
kind of went
probably their
away
best
from him
player.
last week and had a lot of
Right.
Zeke early in the game, and then it wasn't until they were down in the hurry up where they kind of dumped it off to Stevenson a lot. They need to
Right.
get him involved early on. Definitely
Yeah.
the right
He's
plan.
he is their best player. I understand that they just got a veteran running back that they're hoping that can help alleviate that pressure on the offense, but Zeke has not been as effective as Ramondre Stevenson has been in the last, handful of years or however
Right.
long. So, I'm right there with you. Pedrito, what's up, Pedrito? Welcome back. That's right, my friend. We are back. We are back, and we are so happy to be back. Appreciate seeing you. You definitely hope to see you in the Discord, talk some game picks. It's going to be definitely a good time. You actually catches us at the tail end of the show as we head into our last game. Is there a $5 Patreon? It's not on Patreon anymore. Check it's on our website, Pedrito. So check importantnonsense.com, the membership thing there. I'm not actually sure. There should be a couple of them. Check on there, and that's how you get access to that, because everything kind of changed a little bit over the off season. We had a kind of a situation happen with the website. It's a long story that maybe we'll hash out later in the Discord, but that's how you get in. So check it out. Hit us up if you have any questions at all. I'm definitely happy to help. And we head into our the first game of 2 on Monday night. Thankfully, they have 2 on Monday night because this is not an interesting game, but it's a lot of
Honestly, neither of them are.
not really, neither of them are, but at least you can kind of, pick your poison, so to say.
Yep.
The Saints take on the Panthers in Carolina, in not really a game that moves the needle for most people. The Saints, 3-point favorites on the road. Total for this game, 39.5. This is another one where we're kind of on both sides of it. And I'm right there with you too, where you're leaning. And I'm sure that you're kind of right where I'm at too, because there's really I don't see a lot of ways that this game could go. When we talk about it, you're on the side of New Orleans covering 3 on the road. For
Yep.
myself, I'm leaning towards the under on 40 points. Like we've kind of said, 40 is a bigger number than other teams have gotten. And I don't know really where either of these teams got that juice to get, a 40 and maybe not like a 38 as their game total. But we digress. First off, I'll let you dive into why you're targeting the Saints. And I'm pretty sure that it'll make my point for me when you end
Right.
up breaking it down beautifully on why I'm kind of leaning towards the under, or it might not. And I might need to scramble around and defend myself here. But let's see what you're breaking down for this one, V.
Yeah, this is a follow up from my pick last week when I had Atlanta -3.5. This is a bet against Carolina's offense, in particular their weapons. Bryce Young just does not have much to work with. Adam Thielen, Terrace Marshall, Jonathan Mingo, it's just not a good group. I think they're getting DJ Chark back this week, but that just doesn't do much. That's not going to help him out enough. He had a couple rookie moments last week. He threw a couple bad picks to Jesse Bates. Learning moment for him. It's not a big deal. I'm sure he'll iron it out, but you really can't trust his weapons to do much for him. And he's going up against the Saints defense that looked really good last week. It was against the Tennessee offense that is probably equally as bad as Carolina's offense looked. They had 3 interceptions, 3 sacks against Ryan Tannehill. New Orleans' defense is flying all over the place. I think they looked really good in week 1, and they should continue it again in week 2 in this matchup. On the other side, New Orleans' offense did not look particularly great against Tennessee, but I think they have just enough firepower to beat this Carolina defense that isn't anything special right now. They just lost J.C. Horn this week. He's going to miss some time, so that secondary is undermanned, and I think an undermanned secondary against Michael Thomas, Rashid Shaheed is not going to be a good plan for Carolina. So I think this should be a pretty, I would say, relatively easy cover for the Saints at -3. I just don't see how they're going to be able to do anything on offense, Carolina, and I don't know how Carolina is going to do much to stop this Saints offense.
Yeah. And, I'm right there with you. That's why we leaned the same way. I'm on the under here at 40. And it's just, what is the Carolina offense really like
Yeah.
banking on right now? They really looked disheveled through most of the game last week. It's not like Atlanta is an overly, tough defense. At least they haven't
Nope.
been in the past. And I don't know. Bryce Young did not look comfortable within the system. They didn't really score many points. It just wasn't a great debut for them as a
Right.
new system. Now the Saints, they're not necessarily world beaters. They're not going to go out and they might not win this division, or maybe they do. Who knows? But they at least, came out and played a tougher team and played better. They just looked like a better football team all around. Now
Yep.
they play decent defense. They really make you kind of earn those points. Now they're not overly talented, but you have a guy like, Marshawn Lattimore who plays really well, and he had some really big plays. You have just, I don't know. I just think that when you look at that team, I see a significantly better team. Then I hate to just continue to down Carolina, but they really don't look like an NFL offense right now or an NFL roster by any means. Now, their defense can be better. I like the pieces on their defense more, and I think that could be a way that they build off having a better season. but as of right now, they're just really not showing a lot. I think
Right.
this game screams like a 32-point game, 40. Like we said, a little bit of a higher number than some of the other ones there. I'm perfectly comfortable taking the under here as well. And
Yep.
that does it for us, V. That wraps us. That is the last game on our schedule. But like I said, for anybody watching, make sure you check us out. Go onto our website, importantnonsense.com. Check out all the work the Important Nonsense team is doing. But that's how you get into our Discord. Become a member, get into our Discord. You can ask us all your betting questions there. You can ask all the guys your fantasy football questions, your DFS questions, your guillotine questions. I don't think anybody in the entire industry has anything to say about guillotine except for us. We are the bleeding edge of guillotine content. Go check it out. And that's how you can get in there and ask us all of our questions in our Discord. You're going to want to become a member, and you can go straight onto our website to get all of the IN merch. Promo code LOCK. Only other thing, we are back the same time next week, 8 p.m. Eastern, so don't miss it. Yeah, I think that about does it. V, do you have any parting words for the folks at home? I think we had a great week 2 show, really broke it down.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of value on the board. I think we did a great job identifying it and giving it out to everybody listening at home. Should be a great week. I think there's a couple potential AFC Championship preview games going on with Cincinnati, Baltimore, or Jacksonville, Kansas City. So should be an exciting week of games. So looking forward to it, and talk to everybody next week.
It's going to be a good one. I can't wait to do it. And I can't wait to see you next week so we can break it all down again. And until next time, everybody, good night and good luck.